She arrived in America with 2 suitcases, one broken dream, and a heart full of fear. No one was waiting for her at the airport. No money. No connections. No accent anyone respected. People told her she would never survive here. They laughed at her job. They mocked her silence. They underestimated her patience. But what they did not know was that every night she cried alone. She was also planning her rise. This is not just a story. This is the reason you should never give up. Emily Carter stood quietly near the arrival gate at JFK Airport, staring at a country she had only seen in movies and documentaries. The lights were brighter than she imagined, and the noise was louder than her thoughts. She clutched her old passport and a small handbag that carried everything she owned in this new world. Inside it were a few clothes, a notebook, and a photograph of her parents who believed she would one day change her destiny. She was 24 years old, an immigrant woman in the United States with no safety net and no guarantee that tomorrow would be kinder than yesterday. Emily had grown up in a small, struggling town where opportunities were limited and dreams were often discouraged. From a young age, she learned what it meant to sacrifice. She worked after school, cleaned houses, helped neighbors, and saved every dollar she could. Education was her escape, and America was her hope. When she finally received her visa, it felt like a miracle, but miracles do not remove fear. They simply open the door to uncertainty. Her first night in the United States was spent in a tiny rented room shared with 2 strangers. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and the silence felt heavy. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to distant sirens, wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. But quitting was not an option because going back meant failure, and she refused to accept that. The next morning, reality hit hard. Emily began applying for jobs, but rejection followed her everywhere. Her accent betrayed her confidence. Her resume was ignored. Some people smiled politely while others barely looked at her. Days turned into weeks, and her savings began to disappear faster than her hope. Eventually, she accepted work as a cleaner in a downtown office building. The job was exhausting and invisible, but she showed up every day before sunrise and left long after sunset. While cleaning empty offices, she watched successful people through glass walls. Men and women in suits, speaking confidently, making decisions, living the life she dreamed of. Instead of feeling jealous, she observed them. She listened, learned, and imagined herself sitting at one of those desks one day. Every night after work, she studied online courses, improving her English, learning new skills, pushing her limits, while her body begged for rest. Loneliness became her constant companion. There were days when no one spoke to her at all. She ate simple meals alone and walked home under cold city lights, fighting tears. She missed her family deeply, but she never called them to complain. She did not want to worry them. Instead, she told them she was doing fine even when she was breaking inside. One winter evening, Emily slipped on icy steps while leaving work. Her hands were numb, her shoes were worn out, and her back ached from endless hours of labor. Sitting there on the cold ground, she felt defeated for the first time. She questioned everything about her choices, her strength, her dream. But then she remembered why she came. She remembered the girl who promised herself a better future. Slowly, she stood up, brushed off the snow, and kept walking. That moment changed something inside her. Emily realized that survival was not enough. She needed growth. She needed courage. From that day, she stopped seeing herself as just an immigrant cleaner. She began seeing herself as a future leader, a woman in progress, someone unstoppable. Emily Carter began to wake up earlier than everyone else in the apartment, not because she had to, but because she wanted time to think without noise. The quiet mornings became her secret space where she planned her future in small, realistic steps. She wrote goals in her notebook, not big, impossible dreams, but simple actions. Learn better English and apply for one new job daily. Save $5 whenever possible. These small promises to herself slowly rebuilt her confidence. At work, she noticed how people treated her differently because of her position. Some ignored her completely, while others spoke to her as if she could not understand simple words. At first, it hurt deeply, but over time, Emily learned an important lesson. Dignity does not come from how others see you, but from how you see yourself. She kept her head high, worked with focus, and never responded to disrespect with anger. Inside, she was becoming stronger than anyone realized. One evening, while cleaning a conference room, she found a notebook left behind by a manager. It was filled with meeting notes, ideas, and business plans. Instead of ignoring it, Emily carefully read a few pages before returning it to Lost and Found. Those pages opened her mind to a world she wanted to be part of. She did not fully understand everything, but she was curious, and curiosity became her fuel. Emily started spending her weekends at the public library. She watched free lectures, read books on communication leadership and business, and practiced speaking English quietly to herself between shelves. Sometimes people stared, but she did not care anymore. Growth has become more important than comfort. She recorded her voice, listened to her mistakes, and tried again and again until improvement slowly appeared. Money remained a constant struggle. There were days when she skipped meals to save rent. Her shoes were worn, her phone was outdated, and her clothes were simple. But instead of feeling ashamed, she reminded herself this was temporary. She was investing in her future, not showing off her present. Every sacrifice had a purpose. One night, she received a call from her mother. Her voice carried worry mixed with pride. She asked if Emily was tired, if she wanted to come back home. Emily paused before answering. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. She said she was tired, but she was not done. That sentence defined her strength. She chose struggle over regret. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. A supervisor at the office noticed Emily staying late studying documents after her shift. Instead of scolding her, he asked why she was interested. Nervous but honest, Emily explained her dream, her efforts, and her desire to learn. For the first time in America, someone truly listened to her. That conversation did not change her life overnight, but it opened a door. The supervisor allowed her to assist with small tasks after work, organizing files, preparing documents, and learning basic office systems. Emily treated this opportunity like gold. She arrived early, stayed focused, and learned faster than anyone expected. Slowly, people began to see her differently. Not as just a cleaner, but as a woman with potential. Emily still cleaned floors and emptied trash, but now she also carried knowledge, confidence, and hope. Every long day felt meaningful because she was no longer just surviving. She was building something invisible but powerful. Deep inside, Emily knew this was only the second step. Bigger challenges were coming. Bigger sacrifices too. But she was no longer afraid of hardship because hardship had already shaped her into someone stronger than her past. Emily Carter's days grew longer and heavier, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in years. She balanced two lives at once. By day, she worked tirelessly, completing every task with precision, and by night she studied, pushed herself, and imagined a future that once felt unreachable. Exhaustion became normal, but giving up no longer crossed her mind. She had crossed the hardest line already, the line where most people turn back. The small office tasks she was given slowly turned into bigger responsibilities. She learned how meetings were scheduled, how reports were prepared, and how decisions were made. Every mistake became a lesson, not a reason to stop. Sometimes she felt embarrassed when she misunderstood instructions, but she asked questions anyway because fear was no longer allowed to control her progress. There were moments when doubt returned unexpectedly. Watching others advance faster, hearing fluent conversations she could not fully follow, and feeling like an outsider even after months in America. On those days, Emily reminded herself that comparison was poison. Her journey was different, and that difference made her resilient. She was not behind, she was building depth. One afternoon, a new employee mocked her accent during a casual conversation. The room went quiet. Emily felt the old pain rise in her chest, but she did not shrink. Calmly, she smiled and continued speaking, finishing her sentence without apology. That moment was powerful. She realized confidence was not about perfect words, but about owning your voice. From that day forward, she spoke more even when her grammar was not perfect. Emily began mentoring herself by observing strong women in the office. She watched how they handled pressure, how they communicated, and how they stood their ground. She practiced those behaviors in small ways, sitting straighter, speaking clearly, and trusting her preparation. Slowly, people began to include her in discussions, asking for her input, valuing her attention to detail. Financial struggles still followed her. An unexpected bill nearly pushed her to the edge. She considered taking a second night job, but her body was already exhausted. Instead, she chose discipline. She budgeted carefully too, cut unnecessary costs, and focused on long-term gain rather than short-term relief. Every hard decision strengthened her self-respect. Late one night, while reviewing documents alone, Emily looked at her reflection in the office window. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by determination and calm strength. She understood then that America was not changing her. She was changing herself. A few months later, the supervisor recommended her for a temporary assistant role. It was not glamorous, and the pay was only slightly better, but to Emily it meant recognition. It meant progress. She accepted immediately, knowing that opportunity often arrives quietly disguised as extra work. As she stepped into the new role, pressure increased. Expectations were higher, mistakes were visible, and failure felt closer. But Emily thrived under responsibility. She prepared relentlessly, double-checked everything, and showed up with consistency. People trusted her because she trusted herself. She still went home tired, still ate simple meals, and still lived modestly. But now she carried something priceless: belief. Belief that her past did not define her and her future was finally within reach. Emily Carter's new role exposed her to pressure she had never experienced before. Deadlines were strict, expectations were high, and mistakes were no longer small. One overlooked detail could affect an entire project. At first, the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. She questioned whether she truly belonged in that environment or if she had simply been lucky. But each morning she reminded herself that opportunity is not given to those who feel ready, it is given to those who show up. There were nights when she stayed late correcting reports and rechecking data while the city outside slept. The office lights reflected off the glass walls, and the silence felt familiar but different. This time she was not cleaning the floors. She was building her future line by line, page by page. The pride she felt was quiet but powerful. Not everyone supported her growth. A few coworkers whispered that she was only there because someone felt sorry for her. Those words traveled fast and cut deep. For a moment, the old insecurity returned, but Emily chose not to confront anyone. She let her work speak instead. She believed that consistency would silence doubt louder than arguments ever could. Then came a setback she did not expect. A major project she helped prepare failed due to a decision made above her level. Even though it was not her fault, the disappointment hit her hard. She blamed herself, replayed every detail, and felt the familiar fear of losing everything she had worked for. For days she walked with heaviness in her chest, wondering if this was the end of her rise. During that difficult time, she received a message from her father. It was short and simple. He reminded her that strength is proven not when things go right, but when they go wrong. Those words grounded her. She realized failure was not a sign to stop, but a test of how badly she wanted to continue. Emily requested feedback instead of hiding. She asked what she could improve and listened carefully without defensiveness. That choice changed everything. Her supervisors noticed her maturity, her accountability, and her hunger to grow. Slowly, trust returned stronger than before. As months passed, her confidence became natural. She no longer needed approval to feel worthy. She walked into rooms knowing she belonged there because she had earned her place through effort and integrity. Her accent was still there, her past still part of her, but neither held her back anymore. One evening, she was asked to lead a small team meeting. Standing at the front of the room, her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. As she spoke, she saw heads nodding and eyes focused on her. In that moment, she understood how far she had come. The woman who once cried alone in a cold room was now guiding others. Emily went home that night and allowed herself to cry, not from pain but from pride. She knew the journey had shaped her into someone unbreakable. Yet, she also knew the final chapter was still unwritten. Emily Carter's life changed quietly, not through applause or sudden fame, but through a moment that felt almost ordinary. She was called into a meeting one morning and asked to sit at the table and not stand by the door. That simple gesture told her everything before a single word was spoken. She was no longer an outsider. She was part of the decision-making. The company offered her a permanent position with growth potential and stability. When she heard the words, her mind went blank for a second. She remembered the broken suitcase, the cold nights, the skipped meals, and the silent tears. She accepted with calm professionalism, but inside her heart was racing. This was not luck. This was earned. Emily moved into a small apartment of her own. It was not luxurious, but it was peaceful. For the first time since arriving in America, she felt safe. She decorated the walls with simple frames and placed her old notebook on the desk as a reminder of where it all started. Every page was filled with goals many already crossed out because they had been achieved. She began helping others, quietly offering guidance to new immigrants who reminded her of herself. She listened without judgment, encouraged without pride, and shared her story when someone felt invisible. She knew how powerful hope could be when someone was standing at the edge of quitting. Years passed, and Emily continued to rise, not by stepping on others, but by lifting herself through discipline, resilience, and humility. Her accent never disappeared, and she never wanted it to. It was proof of her journey. Proof that she had survived, grown, and succeeded without losing herself. One day she stood in front of a mirror wearing a professional suit, preparing for a presentation. She smiled softly, realizing she had become the woman she once watched through glass walls. Not because America saved her, but because she refused to give up on herself. Emily called her parents that evening. Her voice was calm, strong, and full of gratitude. She told them she was finally home, not in a place, but in herself. They cried together across the distance, knowing every sacrifice had been worth it. This story is not just about an immigrant woman in the United States. It is about anyone who feels unseen, unheard, and underestimated. Success does not belong to the loudest or the luckiest. It belongs to those who stay when quitting feels easier.